A few years into my 40s, I found myself tailing my wife, Brittany, and her soon-to-be lover, Richie, to a hotel. Fortune was on my side as I managed to follow them without being noticed. Brittany and Richie, each carrying small bags and trying to appear as a sophisticated couple despite a palpable tension, remained oblivious to my presence. I recalled the conversation I had with the secretary earlier, which led me to this moment. While Brittany seemed captivated by her reflection in the large mirror at the front desk, I noticed another couple. They were married in quite the contrast. The man carried a large suitcase along with several bags, while the woman had just a small travel bag. They were dressed in practical travel attire, signaling a long holiday ahead. Seizing the moment, I discreetly snapped a few pictures of Brittany and Richie through the mirror. As Richie checked in, the hotel administrator caught sight of me. I gave a slight nod, and she returned it with a smile, seemingly enjoying the subtle intrigue. I overheard faint whispers and saw Brittany distance herself from Richie before turning away. The receptionist then addressed Brittany, causing her to pause, and handed her an envelope I had previously arranged to be delivered. After a while, the couple in front of me exchanged glances as if they had an incredible connection, and the gentleman loudly grunted. Then something strange happened. My wife suddenly ran out of the room, dragging her small suitcase with her. The receptionist handed Richie another envelope, which I handed to her. With these words, I turned and headed towards the door. Here's the story of how we got here and what happened next. It all started at a Christmas party thrown by my wife Brittany. There she was, her friend Diana, and her husband Harry. I wasn't particularly attracted to Harry, but I was fine with him. We chatted, but we had no common interests. He was into golf and cricket, and I preferred old cars, DIY, and gardening. Diana and Brittany have been friends since school and even worked in the same bank, but on different sides, Diana in a commercial bank and Brittany in a government bank. As I followed Brittany for drinks, I heard her say, "I wouldn't mind having his slippers next to my bed." Looking across the room, I saw Richie Galt, who had recently joined the bank. Initially, all conversations revolved around him. A handsome Greek god, tall, about 6 feet, with curly blonde hair and a confident posture. He could talk to the bank's management, but he was also on the same level as Brittany and Diana. Standing next to him was an attractive young blonde woman whom he had his arm around her waist. I had already had a conversation with Richie, and he came across as arrogant. Like Harry, we had some communication, but no common interests. "What exactly is wrong with my slippers next to your bed?" I asked. "And I don't think his blonde would really want to see his slippers near your bed." "Who is she anyway?" Diana exploded. "This is his wife, Brittany. They've been married for 5 years, and they have a son, Stephen. He's 2 years old, I think. She seems to be having some problems." She showed some interest, but did not go deeper into the details. I looked at Brittany, seeing some concern in her eyes. My tone became serious. "If you want someone else's slippers next to your bed, first divorce me." With these words, I headed to the toilet. Although I didn't actually need the toilet, I just wanted to show my displeasure. When I returned, Brittany apologized. "It was just a saying, honey. I would never cheat on you." "If I find out that his or anyone else's slippers were anywhere near the bed on which you were lying, I will immediately file for divorce," I said sternly. Diana looked at me. "Robert, don't overdo it." Brittany lowered her eyes. "I would never do this to you, darling. I love you." She took a sip of her drink and bit her lip, looking remorseful. Diana just giggled. "I'm sure Robert would forgive you for this oversight," I said, looking at Diana. She noticed my gaze, and I just snorted in response. Harry almost repeated the same thing to Diana, but her reaction was completely different. She laughed at Harry and replied, "You wouldn't divorce me, darling. You love me too much to forgive me for one mistake, right?" I've never heard Harry swear like that before. "Don't try it, honey. You might not like it," he replied. Diana had a twinkle in her eye, then playfully patted Harry's hand and added, "No, I won't, but you still won't divorce me. You love me too much." Although I didn't know Harry very well, his behavior made me hope that she wouldn't make a mistake. It was at this point that I realized why I didn't like Diana. She took everyone, including her husband, who obviously loved her immensely, for granted. This conversation made me a little wary. Brittany sometimes followed Diana, and although not always, it still bothered me. I told Brittany that I didn't approve of her following Diana's dubious advice. I reminded her that she had her own opinions, but Diana seemed to be able to convince her. I warned her to be herself. After that, things seemed to calm down a bit, but I noticed that both Diana and Brittany were occasionally sneaking glances at Richie. Diana had a look of lust on her face. She even went and asked Richie to dance while Harry went to the toilet. It all looked like Richie had asked Diana himself, and it was very slow. Since it was Brittany's office party, I agreed to go. She drove the car. It was my company's responsibility. We shared such things. When we dropped Diana and Harry off at their house and drove home, the rest of our journey was very silent and cold. I said in a low voice, I think Diana trying to start an affair with Richie would be disrespectful to her marriage and Richie's wife. If you help her, I will have serious doubts about our marriage and future because it will show the same disrespect. She didn't answer. Things picked up over the weekend and the atmosphere became less chilly. Brittany received several text messages from Diana with a special tone. It was the same giggling frog. When we went to bed on Saturday night, I found an old pair of slippers at the bottom of my closet and placed them on her side of the bed. She got the joke and smiled, and then we made love. Everything returned to normal, but I kept an eye on everything, including how she dressed and what time she arrived. I tried to do things that I thought she liked to show that I loved her and to let her know what she had to lose if she decided to cheat or help a cheater. There was no more talk about Richie. It wasn't her cheating that bothered me so much as the fact that I helped Diana do it. From time to time, I reminded her of the possible consequences if I found out that she was helping Diana cheat on Harry. I was pointing out that celebrities seem to make and break their marriages by not paying attention to their promises. I told her stories that I had heard and also made up some cases where husbands and wives discovered their partners cheating, and I made it clear that if she ever did anything like that, I would leave and disappear from her life. I'll just leave. I went for a walk with the guys from work. It wasn't a place we usually went to, but one of the guys liked the barmaid. There I saw Diana and Richie, and they seemed very relaxed and cozy. When I got home, I told Brittany about it. She quickly noticed that they were working together. I took a photo and showed it to her. When I asked why she was in the bar at 10 p.m., dressed just like Diana, she instantly replied that they were just friends, as if she had pre-prepared answers. Does Harry know about your friendship, or is he off to play golf again? I knew that he often disappeared on weekends for this activity. She turned and headed upstairs to bed. I finished off the rest of my beer and followed her. As I sat down on my side of the bed, I decided to clarify. Did you know that Diana made an appointment? She answered quietly. She said she might see him this weekend. Does Harry know? I don't know. Her voice was expressionless. She rolled over, looked at me, and said, I won't interfere. I recognized that look. I trusted her. I snuggled up to her in bed, hugged and kissed her, then pulled her onto my shoulder. This was one of her favorite places. Nothing more needed to be said. A week later, after a long conversation with Brittany's mother, she asked if I would like to go with her to visit her parents in a few weeks. They had some small chores that needed to be done. I liked Mavis and David. They were kind and nice people, so I gladly agreed. On Friday, we went to Gloucester. It was too late to do anything, so Brittany and her mom were just chatting, discussing Brittany's old friends, family news, and local gossip. David and I were just talking and drinking some beer. We had a great day with them. I helped with some chores that I could do for them. In fact, they weren't that old. David was only 65, but arthritis in his hands prevented him from doing some of the work. I was happy to help him. In the evening, we went out to eat and then returned home to continue our conversation. As we were finishing dinner, Brittany's phone started playing with the sound of a giggling frog. She didn't even look at the screen, she just turned it on vibration. The fact of the matter is that messages can be checked later. The food was excellent and the company enjoyable. On the way home, I could still hear her phone vibrating. We returned home and drank some more. David got some crafty old hen, so I drank a couple of bottles of this drink. Some of us were already a little drunk when we got upstairs, but overall it was a great evening. Even though I wondered about the messages from Diana, of which there were quite a few, I decided to ignore it. We went to bed and Brittany felt a little in love. It was weird doing this with her parents in the next room, but I just enjoyed the moment. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the tricky old hen, as I jokingly called my bladder, decided to remind me of its existence, and I headed to the toilet. There on the dressing table was Brittany's phone, and I heard it vibrate and light up. It was a message from Diana, at this time in the morning, and I thought, what's on her mind now? I looked at the message preview. "Oh my god, this is amazing. You should try it, even if just once. And here, the preview ended. I knew better than to interfere, but I still took the phone with me to the toilet. We both knew each other's passwords. When I opened the message folder from Diana, I only saw previews, but none of them were opened. I couldn't afford to open them without Brittany noticing, but from what I saw, it was clear that she had spent the entire night with Richie, and what that meant. I wondered if this weekend was planned as a spa weekend of sorts, but Harry didn't say anything about it. I couldn't contact him to confirm this. I haven't opened a single message. I was just doing my business in the toilet, trying not to attract attention. On Sunday, I got up early to finish some chores for David. When they all arrived around 9, I prepared tea. When Brittany dropped her phone onto the charger, it lit up. I looked closely, but did not see any messages from Diana. She didn't seem to notice my gaze. I think Diana and Harry were busy all last night. Is there anything interesting in these messages? I asked. Until I mentioned it, she seemed to have forgotten about them. She looked at her phone and then quickly disappeared into another room. She seemed to be talking to Dee, but I couldn't understand what they were talking about. When she returned, her face was red. Something happened. We all packed up, climbed into the car, and began our journey home. As we got onto the M5, I said to Brittany, "Looks like Diana has been busy this weekend." I didn't mention Harry's name, only Diana. "Yeah, I think they had a good weekend." We were already approaching the house, and there was silence in the car. Brittany seemed preoccupied with her own thoughts. When we got off the freeway and stopped at a traffic light, I decided to clarify the situation. I decided not to beat around the bush. I turned to her and said, "If I find out that Diana spent this weekend with Richie and you helped her arrange a visit to your parents, I will not be able to forgive it, and I will seriously think about our marriage. I warned you about this." The lights switched and the car behind me honked. The next 10 miles home were spent in silence. When I looked at her, she was staring at her hands in her lap. It was her damn fault. We got home, and I decided it was time to have a beer, maybe a little earlier than usual. Brittany went upstairs to unpack and put the dirty clothes in the laundry basket. When she came down, it seemed to me that she was crying. Her eyes were slightly red. She suggested ordering Chinese food to save time on cooking. I agreed, having already drunk beer, and decided not to argue. She came back with food, and I noticed she bought me a few more bottles of crafty old hen in the supermarket. I wondered if she talked to Diana while she was out of the house. I have already prepared the plates and everything needed for dinner. She was completely depressed when we sat down to eat. On the way, she told me, "Love, I didn't help Diana, but I told her we were leaving this weekend. I didn't arrange it so she could go away and spend time with Richie, but I suspect she took advantage of it, knowing that you're not talking to Harry. I'm sorry, honey, I didn't see it coming. I think she would have done it. I've had enough text messages and phone conversations to know she did. I don't know what to do. Should I tell Harry, or is it better not to interfere so as not to ruin their marriage? What you need to do is think about it and make your own decision. One that you can fall asleep with at night. Look at yourself in the mirror and say, I made the right choice. And most importantly, look Harry in the eyes when we see them again." We watched a part of the program on TV. I drank a couple more bottles of beer and we went to bed. There was nothing erotic, just hugs. Right before she went to bed, she simply said, "I'm so sorry, darling." She came home late from work on Monday, and even though she called me and told me about it, I was still worried. Over dinner, she said that she had a long conversation with Diana and learned some unpleasant details, but did not intend to share them with me. It was good. She warned Diana that this time she would not tell, but next time if she found out something, she would act differently. And if Harry asked her directly, she wouldn't lie. She warned Diana that she would not assist her in cheating on her husband, warning that this would destroy her marriage and Harry would leave her. Although she laughed at the comment about slippers at the Christmas party, Harry's response was only silence, his expression extremely serious. Diana told her that this was only planned for one time. It was good, but she wasn't going to take that risk anymore. And if Richard's wife found out, she would divorce him. So he didn't want a repeat. It seems Richard's father-in-law didn't trust him, and there was a prenuptial agreement between them. Over time, everything in the house began to improve. One day during lunch, I went to the local newsagent, bought a magazine about cars, and went to the cafe to read quietly, avoiding the noise of the office, when I noticed one of the young guys from our office, Martin, coming out with a magazine. Looks like he met a woman from sales. She was a little older than him and looked attractive. Martin was a nice guy himself, but he always seemed a little naive to me. They grabbed their drinks and sat in the booth behind me. I heard her apologize for the weekend mix-up, but her husband became suspicious, and she had to cancel Saturday night. She said she wouldn't be working late for a while. She discussed how important it was for her to watch her behavior and appearance to avoid her husband's suspicions. She said that her husband noticed her clothes, and she feels guilty, so she pays more attention to her husband in order to distract him. She said that her relationship with her husband was not very good. Martin was better. He met her needs better than her husband ever could. I met Martin by chance at the printer when he was alone. I decided to take this chance and shared my observations with him. I told him what I heard. Although I warned him to be careful, I realized that this was his personal matter. He opened up to me and shared that she told him about how her husband abused her and that she couldn't leave him because of the children. We discussed the problems they faced and the ways they hid their encounters from their husbands. He unloaded as if he had exhaled all the burden that he had previously held within himself, even in front of his colleagues at work. I reminded him that although the company doesn't care about his personal life as long as it doesn't affect his work, if a husband finds out about his wife, it could lead to serious problems. This became a kind of guidance for me during this situation. My worries arose when I noticed that Brittany had changed her ringer on her cell phone. Previously, it was the sound of a frog, but now Diana appeared on the screen. This alarmed me. After speaking with Martin, I was warned what to look out for. I observed her behavior, clothing style, makeup. Nothing has changed. She still dressed the same as before, no matter the weather. She was never late for work without warning. Even when hanging out with colleagues after work, she always left early and asked me to pick her up. I used to offer to do this myself, but lately she has started insisting that I pick her up. This lasted about 5 weeks. I felt that something was wrong. However, in bed everything was as usual, and I did not pay attention to it. I tried to check her phone, but she changed her password. When I asked her about it, she said that someone at work saw her enter her password, so she decided to change it, but forgot to tell me about it. She immediately told me the new password so there would be no suspicion. I had to wait until she left the phone on charge overnight to check it. I didn't find anything suspicious. At a summer barbecue in a bank, my neck began to move and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Harry was busy golfing over the weekend, so Diana joined us. Realizing that we were going to call a taxi, I decided that I could afford to drink a little more than usual, which provoked my long sittings in the toilet. I tried to appear a little drunk so they wouldn't pay attention, and it worked. When I went to the bar for drinks and returned much faster than expected, I found Brittany and Diana secluded in a quiet corner of the garden. Why did they choose this particular corner? I snuck up behind them and heard Diana talking. We have everything under control, so no one will notice anything suspicious. We have calculated all the details, the place, the time, even your appearance, and also, importantly, I have booked a hotel in your name for the symposium, if Robert decides to check. Don't worry, it's just one time, Diana said. I still have my doubts. What if I get caught? Brittany was worried. You won't get caught, there's nothing wrong with that. Just be kinder to Robert, it's easy with men, Diana assured her. I don't like the idea of risk yet, Brittany admitted. Sheh, he'll be back soon. We'll discuss everything at work. As soon as I get information about the hotel, I'll tell you. Don't leave traces electronically, Diana reassured her. Although no names were mentioned, after their conversation it became clear to me that this was a date with Richie. All I had to do was wait. After the taxi took Diana home and came back for us, I decided to discuss what I had noticed with Brittany. I noticed the way you look at Richie. If I find his slippers anywhere near our bed, I'll leave. Like I said, I'll just leave, I said, trying to convey the seriousness of my words. Suddenly sobering from my intoxication, I looked at her. She understood what I meant. There was no answer. She just stared out the window. When she returned home and told me about the symposium she was presenting, I showed joy for her. When I asked about the theme of the symposium, she faltered a bit. Banking in the 2030s. It sounded ridiculous, but I tried to be enthusiastic, hoping that I was wrong. Later I checked whether such a symposium was actually planned and found out that she was telling the truth. She decided to arrive at the hotel early to avoid morning traffic on the day of the symposium. But why was she so confused? The hotel room will likely remain empty as Brittany meets Richie elsewhere. Meeting him in the same hotel where a symposium with colleagues was taking place would be stupid, and neither she nor Diana would do it. We rarely spent time apart, so I suggested that I accompany her, and we could spend the weekend at a hotel like we had done once or twice before. She was very confused by this idea, and said that after the symposium she would be tired and want to be at home with her husband in her bed with him. The Love Hotel had to be nearby, since she still needed to be at the symposium by 8 in the morning if she actually went. So I started looking for inexpensive hotels near the symposium site. There turned out to be quite a lot of them. I still wasn't sure it was a date and decided that Brittany should make her own decision about whether or not to break up our marriage, given all the warnings. I loved her and wanted to give her one last chance, but after that I wanted to see how she intended to restore our trust. I sensed that she was under Diana's influence and again warned her about it. Then, a week before the symposium, something else heightened my suspicions. The bank threw a company party at a local bar to celebrate the new contract. I offered to pick them up when they finished as usual. It would be strange if they refused my offer. They tried, but not very hard, I insisted. I arrived early and stood quietly in the corner. Music was playing and everyone was dancing. I saw Richie take Brittany by the hand and lead her to the dance floor, but in the middle of the song she moved to the side and seemed to be delayed. I took out my phone and took photos. I looked around, but no one was paying attention except Diana, whom I could see. And then I saw Richie put his hand on Brittany's chest. I expected her to push him away, but nothing happened. I took a few more photos. Then they kissed. It was not a passionate kiss, just a touch of lips. I also captured this in photographs. The music stopped and Richie and Brittany returned to the table as I approached. Brittany was clearly not herself. Usually she was in control, but today something was wrong. When she noticed me, her face turned red. This did not make me happy, but this was not yet a reason to talk about divorce. From now on, it seems that I will need to be more vigilant and warn her about the possible consequences of cheating. While we were driving home, I asked if Richie and Diana were planning to attend the symposium. Brittany said she didn't know. When we stopped at a red light, I turned to her and said, "I don't believe you wouldn't know if your colleague was going to the same symposium as you. I don't want you to lie to me." The light turned green, and I couldn't speak anymore, just look at her as we drove away. She looked down silently. I continued, "You know what I think about cheaters. If they use this to get together and you cover for them, then that's cheating to me. I'm warning you again. If you're cheating on me, I'll leave. Just leave, and you will never see me again." Now I was convinced that something was wrong, but how can this be confirmed? I felt like the answer was at the symposium, and I should act like a detective and keep an eye on her. Then there was a pause. I stopped checking her phone, but in passing I noticed her phone light up. Best Western Solihull. Mrs. Jones, your confirmation. Our name is not Jones, and the hotel where the symposium was held was the Best Western Coventry Hotel, not far from here. When I checked her phone later, the message was neither there nor in the trash. I had them. Several plans were spinning in my head. She will have one last chance, and in case she chooses wrong, I visited our lawyers and started the case. I left with the separation letter as a prelude to the divorce. I received a copy of the divorce petition online that shocked me, but given the choice, I didn't think she'd go for it. But I had to fix it so she wouldn't be tempted to do it again. But even if she hadn't gone through with it, what would I have done? The problem for me was that I loved her with all my heart, but there was a limit. If she allowed a part of any other person to enter her body, that would be it. I won't stand for this. If she didn't, we could be working on trust, and it would be an uphill battle. One that can still fail. Wednesday Night Love was fantastic, but I still couldn't stop wondering if it was guilty lovemaking. Brittany promised me more over the weekend. I booked a hotel room in Solihull, still hoping nothing would happen. I took a day off from work and came early. I had a long conversation with the administrator about cheating and dating. She told me it was obvious who was having the affair. Married couples did not arrive holding hands. They were much more practical. Usually the husband carries the luggage and the wife carries a small bag. Any one of them will speak. If they were having an affair, they both carried small bags and the man would always talk, and usually he would put his arm around her waist, or they would hold hands, trying to act like a married couple. As long as the staff didn't interfere, it was all a bit of fun. So, when I made my suggestion for Mr. and Mrs. Jones, the receptionist thought it was a good idea, laughed a little, especially since they caught it on CCTV. But it cost me £20. I saw Richie and Brittany arrive and followed them, with a mature couple between me and them. They walked in exactly like the lovers the receptionist had described. I managed to take a photo, and I wondered how long this lover's gaze would last. I heard him tell the secretary. Mr. and Mrs. Jones were booked in. The administrator looked at me, and I nodded. Of course, sir. She leaned over to the computer and did her thing. She asked him to fill out a vehicle registration form and then handed him a key card. I suggested the next point to the secretary. She seemed to think it was a little entertaining. She looked at my wife, who was next to her as a lover, and smiled. Then everything changed. I saw Brittany's body shaking, and she pulled away from Richie. She shook her head. I think she muttered, No, I can't." Richie looked at her confused. The administrator continued and said, "The hotel is not interested in your names. However, I am sure your real name is Mrs. Brittany Harris." I saw my wife stagger. She moved away from Richie. The administrator continued calmly, "I have this envelope for you. Have a good day." She smiled and handed over the envelope I gave her. With that, she returned to her computer. My wife just stood there with an envelope in her hand. The administrator looked up and said, "May I suggest you open this before you go to your room?" I didn't ask her to say this, but it was a good idea. Brittany just stood there, frozen. Richie took the envelope from her and opened it. Oh shit. He handed the contents to Brittany. She took them and looked at the pictures of them kissing and Richie caressing Brittany's breasts. She opened a folded piece of paper that was an unsigned divorce petition and separation letter. Attached to it was a note that said, "What you do in the next 30 seconds will depend on whether you receive a signed divorce petition." I had time for her, but time didn't really matter. It was her actions that mattered. The couple behind them chuckled, which made them take action. Brittany turned and ran towards the front door of the hotel, past me. She didn't look back. Richie just stood there, looking stunned. The administrator handed him an envelope and said, "This is for you, Mr. Galt." The letter inside said, "Your wife received copies of photographs and details of the night you had planned. Good evening." It was unsigned. I went outside. Brittany dialed a number on her phone. I headed to my Land Rover. My phone started ringing her ringtone. She looked up and saw me. I called, "Do you want to ride somewhere?" She dropped her suitcase and ran towards me. "I'm really sorry." I opened the passenger door for her. "Get in." Tears streamed down her face as she climbed inside. I went and took her suitcase and put it in the back of the Land Rover. "Sorry, honey. Sorry Diana got me into this." I ignored her. "What kind of car does he have?" That black Audi over there." She pointed to a black Mercedes parked under the trees. "Are you sure this is a Merc?" "Yeah, I'm sure he parked it there because he didn't want anyone to see it." It was a Merc EQB SUV costing £50,000. How could he afford this? His salary was probably about the same as Brittany's. I was wondering if his wife had her own income or was it family money? But I had my own things to do. I turned to Brittany and said, "You shouldn't call him." She quickly took the phone out of her purse and handed it to me. Was it because of her lack of self-confidence, or did she want to show me that she was sorry? I put the phone in my pocket. I had something else to do. I walked to the back of my Land Rover and took out several tools. I have Land Rover, so I'll have to carry tools, I thought. I sent a pre-arranged email from my phone and crept to the back of his car, checking for CCTV. It didn't bother me too much. I just risked a suspended sentence or a fine. For damage. My scissors cut off all the nipples on the tires, and the Stanley knife left cuts on the sidewalls of each tire. The tires are flat, they may not burst, but the car will be dangerous to drive and all tires will have to be replaced. The next step was to use a 2-pound ball head hammer to hit the windshield, directly in the driver's line of sight. It turned out to be even better than I expected. The cracks spread in different directions, with I'm back in Land Rover. "Can we go home now, please?" "Over time? I'm not done here yet." "Please?" I didn't bother to answer her before the front doors of the hotel opened. Richie ran out, dragging his suitcase. His phone rested in the crook of his shoulder as he tried to turn off the car alarm. I managed to take a photo of it. The name of the hotel was visible. I sent this to his wife too. My windows were down so I could hear him talking on the phone. "Honey, it's not what it looks like. I would never cheat on you. I'm just going to the hotel. I'm taking courses, you know that." He made a pause. "No, I was just helping her." He got into the car and realized the condition of the windshield. He got out of the car, still talking on the phone. "Honey, it's not me. I didn't do it." Then his phone rang, he looked at the screen, and I heard him say, "Oh, damn." I wonder if it was a photo of him groping Brittany's breasts, or if they'd both walked into the hotel with their arms around Brittany's waist. Although shot from behind, it was clearly them, and what I didn't plan on was the mirror behind the reception desk showing their faces. Or was him leaving the hotel he said he had just entered. It doesn't matter that the damage was done. Now it's time to go. I started the car and drove out of the parking lot. Brittany just sat there and cried. She tried to talk to me several times, but to no avail. I kept hearing her whisper, "I'm so sorry." I saw her steel herself, and she turned to look at me and said, "Honey, can we stop and talk about this?" I wasn't in the mood to talk, but it had to happen. She didn't notice where we were, not while I'm driving. Next stop on the freeway. That's when she looked out and realized we were heading south on the M5 rather than north towards the house. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Your parents. Please no, it will destroy them. You love them. You wouldn't do that to them." I looked at her and growled. I didn't do it. She burst into tears again. I had no intention, but she didn't know that. I told her, "Did you think that would be part of the consequences of you taking Richie as your lover? We planned it so carefully that I would never get caught. It would only be one time. You'd never know. You wouldn't get hurt. It was just for the experience." All excuses and reasons came out through tears. I wonder if these were the excuses Diana used to convince her. Probably. I just thought, did Diana Ritchie's pimp really find her lovers and arrange all this for him? This would be an interesting discovery for the bank. I may have to assume it, even if it were not true. By we, I assume you mean yourself and Diana. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her nod her head. I asked you, what do you think will happen if you get caught? This time Diana did not put her marriage at risk. The next services are just over a mile away. I'll give you half an hour there to convince me not to take you to your mom and dad. She started talking. I raised my hand. She just sat and looked out the window. We got to the service station. I parked the car and told her to find a quiet corner while I went for a drink. I reached a kiosk with 2 teas. She doesn't really like tea, but she hates tea at freeway stops. She took a sip, and it pulled her up, her face scrunched up as she waited for the latte. She looked at me and said, "Okay, I deserve it." She sat there until I spoke. "You have 27 minutes left." Again, time didn't matter. The words did. I know I made a promise at the altar, and although I didn't break it, I came so close that nothing changed. I lied to you, hid things from you, and disrespected my wedding vows to you. So, I don't know if you'll believe me, but I promise I'll never do it again. Let's just say, once almost bitten, I'll never see Diana again if they don't do this. Don't fire me. She seems to be able to think for herself when Diana isn't playing devil's advocate. Brittany continued, "Diana convinced me it would be safe. You will never know, and you will never get hurt. This should have been a one-off. Exactly the same as hers. I've never had anyone other than you and Dee convince me that the risk is worth it because the risk is so low if we plan for it right. Doubts arose as soon as he picked me up from the bank and went there. Richie was a little, how can you say, energetic in his driving, and then I had a thought. What if we had a car? An accident or something like that. We didn't expect it to destroy you. When Richie made the reservation, I looked in the mirror behind the reception desk. I thought to myself, and you've said this often enough, do I like the person who is looking at me? And at that moment, I hated the person looking back at me, and I decided not to follow through, to come home and tell you how stupid I was. Then, when the receptionist looked at me and smiled, I realized that she knew that I was going to cheat on my husband. I walked away, and I was left with naked fear. So even if I stopped now, it might be too late to save my marriage, but I know you, if I continued, it would be over forever. I left and distanced myself from Richia. Then she said my real name and gave me an envelope. I guessed what was in it, so you all knew. You must have told the secretary. It didn't matter how she knew. It was still the look on her face. I told Brittany how the secretary told me how they spot scammers, and that she and Richie followed the exact script, so I didn't have to tell her. She would have seen it right away. So have you thought about what would happen if you got caught? Yeah, but every time I brought it up, Diana just told me it's foolproof. You won't find out, so it won't hurt you. I'm ashamed to admit that I didn't even think about my parents and what they would think if they caught me. She told me that this experience would be good for both of us, that I might learn something new that might make you happy. Now I know that's bullshit because you're wondering where I got it from. Diana planned everything. It worked for her. I just went with it. But we had it all planned out. No weird flirty clothes. No late nights. All the late work was real, as we always told you. I came home early from our girlfriend, and Lee asked you to pick me up. We won't give you any reason to worry. Ah, see, this was part of your downfall. You diligently wore the same clothes in any weather or went out with friends. This in itself was a sign that you were hiding something. Coming home early from girls' night out. Again, completely out of the ordinary, and your excuse of being bored just didn't hold up, causing me to pick you up from happy hour just so you could show how much you love me to your coworkers by hovering over me. And the love was fantastic. I guess it was with the person responsible for the celebration. Partly yes, because of what I planned to do, but mostly because I love you and I enjoyed doing this with you. Or to compare with Richie. She looked at me questioningly. No, it never occurred to me. I continued. I saw all this, got worried, and started watching you. Showed up earlier than we planned to pick you up. You were great. You had never made a mistake until 2 weeks ago at the contract victory party. You asked me to pick you up. I arrived at 10 and hung around in the corner. Nobody saw me. I was watching you. You only danced once with Richie, and when he thought no one was watching, he fondled your breasts. But you didn't. Stop him. It would have been a slap in the face for someone else. So, I felt that when you let him handle it, something was planned. Then when you came home last week and said you were at the symposium, all the warning signs came on. Up like a Christmas tree. Even if I hadn't seen that paw, I would still have followed you, but it gave me a photo opportunity. You were too perfect. You've never been a minute late. That's not like you. Sometimes you're 5 or 10 minutes late when it doesn't matter. You always called well ahead of time if you worked late, and I'm sure if I checked, you were always at work. You asked me to pick you up when you went somewhere in the evening. You never did this before. I usually offered, but you almost insisted and always waited for me. I didn't have to reassure you like I usually did, and when you went out to the party, you dressed sloppy and not smart as usual. You even asked me to help you pack your clothes so I could make sure there was nothing provocative in them. You've never done this before. Did Diana have your erotic underwear then? No, she wasn't there. I just took the nightgown you saw me pack. I usually sleep naked, you know that, but with another man, it didn't feel right. She looked at her tea and said quietly, so we weren't as smart as we thought. Damn, I feel so stupid taking Diana's advice. She looked at me and continued, and you warned me so many times. What a complete fool I was. Tears streamed down her face and fell into the tea. She pulled herself together, took a sip of iced tea, and winced. I had my doubts about going through with this, but when that secretary looked at me, she could tell I was going to cheat on my husband. Oh, would put me. Then it dawned on me that this was wrong on every level. Honey, I will do everything. I will sign a post-nuptial agreement with a lawyer who will sort everything out. I will leave with nothing. I'll do anything. I wouldn't, but if you insist, I'll even say my mom, dad, and yours, and if you take me back, I'll make myself look bad and you'll look better. I wouldn't do that to old people, not to any of them. Brittany continued, This is not an excuse. I can't even say I didn't know what I was thinking. I knew exactly what I was thinking. That you will never know about it. It won't hurt you, but for me, it will be an experience. You know it, I love to plan, and I got caught up in planning this, but with no idea how it would end, and every time I doubted Diana had a reasonable alternative reason or excuse. I'm so sorry, dear. So wrong. Big question. Why? I asked. It was for the experience. You will never know about it, and you will never get hurt. Diana assured me that it would be safe and fun. I've never had anyone but you, and it will only be this once. Diana convinced me. It was worth the risk because the risk was so low as long as we planned for it carefully. Because she did it, we knew all the pitfalls, and now I think Diana was probably drunk that she got away with it, and she got away with it. It would be the same for me, and she would be keeping company with someone who cheated on her husband with Richie. Sorry, this is just a hindsight that just came to me. And what were you going to do when you decided not to go through with it? I asked her. I really don't know. My original thought was to take a taxi and go to the symposium. There's still a room there for me, and I won't have to tell you what a fool I've been. But then I realized that this would only make things worse. A funny thought flashed through my head. I was just hoping that you could leave work and come and save me. I know this all sounds made up because I received the letter and you knew all about it. But that's what was going through my head. Honey, I was so confused. I felt so guilty. I'm still trying to figure it out in my head. I was so stupid that I even let this happen. I'm so sorry, honey. I sat and thought for a while. I knew what I wanted to do, but what did she want? What would you like to do now? I asked. I want my husband to take me home so I can start making it up to him. To apologize for being a stupid fool. For not taking his advice and being so stupid that I thought I could do something to hurt him. I've never disrespected him, but from his perspective it will look that way, and I'll finally have to start building trust. I know it won't be easy, and I don't know how to do it yet, but I can't. That is if I'm not with him. Please, I beg you, I will get down on all fours here and now, but please give me a chance to earn that trust and make my stupid mistake in front of you. She took a deep breath and continued. I need to get Diana out of my life, and I think I've probably lost my job. I'm not sure what to do with this yet, but if you take me home, it will give me time to think. We're back in Land Rover, and I headed south again. Brittany just sat in the corner and cried until I reached the next intersection, where I turned onto the freeway and headed north, she noted. She turned in her seat, looked at me, and said, Darling, thank you very much. You won't regret this. I promise with all my heart and soul. She continued to cry, but I think this time they were tears of joy. We were driving on the freeway for about half an hour when Brittany said to me, Can I ask you a question, please? I simply nodded my head. If you knew all about it, why didn't you stop me? I believe that you are your own woman, and you must make your own choices. I warned you many times. but you chose to ignore my warnings. You know how I feel about cheating, so it had to be your choice. Thankfully, you made the right choice in the end, but you damaged me, our marriage, and my trust in you. But if I didn't think our marriage could be saved, we would still be heading south." I heard sobs coming from the other side of the rover. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but she saw her own flaws, and once you see your flaws, you'll understand what you can do to counteract any mistakes they allowed you to make. It was already late when we returned home. All I wanted was a quiet beer to let the troubles of the day fade away. Brittany went to bed when I walked over. I slid next to her, and she rolled over and hugged me. I was tired and fell into a deep sleep. Brittany got up early in the morning and brought me a cup of hot tea in bed. She was dressed for work. I was still tired. She leaned over, kissed me on the lips, stroked my face, and said, "Thank you, my dear. I love you." I had already arranged a day off from work, so I was just pottering around the house and garden. I didn't know what time to expect Brittany to return, but I received a message. Be home around 2. It was too early for her. I wondered what happened. When she came in, she grabbed a large glass of red wine for herself and a beer for me. It was still early, but she looked like she needed it. She told me what she did when she came to work. Diana saw her enter and go to her manager's office. Diana turned pale. She told her manager what happened and why she was not in Coventry. HR was called, and she repeated what she had told her manager. She told me she straightened up, held back her tears, and just told them everything. She told them she had probably lost her marriage and was ready to resign. She was sent home and told to wait for a phone call. She walked out and didn't look at Diana. She told me that she visited our lawyer and managed to arrange a meeting with a junior lawyer that afternoon, and she had a draft postnuptial agreement. She placed it in front of me. It said that if she made love outside of our marriage, she would get nothing. There was no mention of me acting outside of marriage. Underneath the caption, she hand-wrote, "plus 1 free pass to make up for my mistake." I added, "threesome, 2 women plus me." She added, "as long as one of the women is me." She showed it to me. I nodded and handed it back to him. She signed my addition. I took the pen from her and made all the handwritten notes. She smiled at me. She took a long sip of wine and asked, "Will you help me? What should I tell Harry?" "He is not a friend, just an acquaintance, the husband of an ex-girlfriend. I do not know what to do." I told her that I thought we would have to tell Harry, but in the end, it got out of our hands. Diana was fired the following Monday. The notice wasn't even a month old, something about using bank funds to book hotel rooms for intimate contacts. Brittany and Richie wasn't the first time she booked rooms. She was fired on the spot because she lied to Harry about the reason. Someone reported her and told her the real reason. Her affair with Richie became known, and it happened often, not just once. Harry, true to his word, divorced Diana. Now, she didn't laugh. She left, we don't know, and it doesn't matter where. Richie got divorced and lost almost everything in the prenuptial agreement. He had an accident, it wasn't me. I later found out that Harry was away on a weekend golfing trip with some very good friends when this happened. And we did it. Because Brittany came forward, she did not lose her job, but she was reprimanded. She worked very hard to restore trust in me. Now that Diana was gone, I believed in her more than she believed in herself. I looked after her friends. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.